confronting her on what I thought was Don Juan's behalf, I turned her against me, and she became what he called my worthy opponent. I asked Lydia if they had had a worthy opponent themselves. "We're not as dumb as you are," she said. "We never needed anyone to spur us." "Pablito's that dumb," Rosa said. "Soledad is his opponent. I don't know how worthy she is, though. But as the saying goes, if you can't feed on a capon, feed on an onion." They laughed and banged on the table. I asked them if any of them knew the sorceress Don Juan had pitted me against, La Catalina. They shook their heads negatively. "I know her," La Gorda said from the stove. "She's from the Nagual cycle, but she looks as if she's 30. "What is a cycle, Gorda?" I asked. She walked over to the table and put her foot on the bench and rested her chin on her arm and knee. "Sorcerers like the Nagual and Genaro have 2 cycles," she said. "The first is when they're human like ourselves. We are in our first cycle. Each of them has been given a task, and that task is making us leave the human form. Eligio, the 5 of us, and the Genaros are of the same cycle. The second cycle is when a sorcerer is not human anymore, like the Nagual and Genaro. They came to teach us, and after they taught us, they left. We are the second cycle to them. The Nagual and La Catalina are like you and Lydia. They are in the same positions. She's a scary sorceress, just like Lydia." La Gorda went back to the stove. The little sisters seemed nervous. "That must be the woman who knows power plants," Lydia said to La Gorda. La Gorda said that she was the one. I asked them if the Nagual had ever given them power plants. "No, not to us 3, Lydia replied. "Power plants are given only to empty people like yourself and La Gorda." "Did the Nagual give you power plants, Gorda?" I asked loudly. La Gorda raised 2 fingers over her head. "The Nagual gave her his pipe twice," Lydia said. "And she went off her rocker both times." "What happened, Gorda?" I asked. "I went off my rocker," she said, as she walked over to the table. "Power plants were given to us because the Nagual was putting a patch on our bodies. Mine hooked fast, but yours was difficult. The Nagual said that you were crazier than Josefina, and impossible like Lydia, and he had to give you a lot of them." La Gorda explained that power plants were used only by sorcerers who had mastered their art. Those plants were such a powerful affair that, in order to be properly handled, the most impeccable attention was needed on the part of the sorcerer. It took a lifetime to train one's attention to the degree needed. La Gorda said that complete people do not need power plants, and that neither the Little Sisters nor the Genaros had ever taken them, but that someday, when they had perfected their art as dreamers, they would use them to get a final and total boost. A boost of such magnitude that it would be impossible for us to understand. "Would you and I take them too?" I asked La Gorda. "All of us," she replied. "The Nagual said that you should understand this point better than any of us." I considered the issue for a moment. The effect of psychotropic plants had indeed been terrifying for me. They seemed to reach a vast reservoir in me and extract from it a total world. The drawback in taking them had been the toll they took on my physical well-being and the impossibility of controlling their effect. The world they plunged me into was unamenable and chaotic. I lacked the control, the power, in Don Juan's terms, to make use of such a world. If I would have the control, however, the possibilities would be staggering to the mind. "I took them myself," Josefina said, all of a sudden. "When I was crazy, the Nagual gave me his pipe to cure me or kill me, and it cured me."
Inhale slowly.
"The Nagual really gave Josefina his smoke," La Gorda said from the stove, and then came over to the table.
and then exhaling.
He knew that she was pretending to be crazier than she was. She's always been a bit off, and she's very daring and indulges in herself like no one else. She always wanted to live where nobody would bother her and she could do whatever she wanted, so the Nagual gave her his smoke and took her to live in a world of her liking for 14 days, until she was so bored with it that she got cured. She cut her indulging. That was her cure.
Just allow your breathing to return.
La Gorda went back to the stove. The little sisters laughed and patted one another on the back. I remembered then that at Doña Soledad's house, Lydia had not only intimated that Don Juan had left a package for me, but she had actually shown me a bundle that had made me think of the sheath in which Don Juan used to keep his pipe. I reminded Lydia that she had said that they would give me that package when La Gorda was present. The little sisters looked at one another and then turned to La Gorda. She made a gesture with her head. Josefina stood up and went to the front room. She returned a moment later with the bundle that Lydia had shown me. I had a pang of anticipation in the pit of my stomach. Josefina carefully placed the bundle on the table in front of me. All of them gathered around. She began to untie it as ceremoniously as Lydia had done the first time. When the package was completely unwrapped, she spilled the contents on the table.
People enter the observatory.
They were menstruation rags. I got flustered for an instant, but the sound of La Gorda's laughter, which was louder than the others, was so pleasing that I had to laugh myself.
But with a slight edge.
That's Josefina's personal bundle, La Gorda said. It was her brilliant idea to play on your greed for a gift from the Nagual in order to make you stay. You have to admit that it was a good idea, Lydia said to me. She imitated the look of greed I had on my face when she was opening the package, and then my look of disappointment when she didn't finish. I told Josefina that her idea had indeed been brilliant, that it had worked as she had anticipated, and that I had wanted that package more than I would care to admit.
Comfortable in your place.
You can have it, if you want it, Josefina said, and made everybody laugh. La Gorda said that the Nagual had known from the beginning that Josefina was not really ill, and that was the reason it had been so difficult for him to cure her. People who are actually sick are more pliable. Josefina was too aware of everything and very unruly, and he had had to smoke her a great many times. Don Juan had once said the same thing about me, that he had smoked me. I had always believed that he was referring to having used psychotropic mushrooms to have a view of me. How did he smoke you? I asked Josefina. She shrugged her shoulders and didn't answer. The same way he smoked you, Lydia said. He pulled your luminosity and dried it with smoke from a fire that he had made.
You reach for the stars.
I was sure that Don Juan had never explained such a thing to me. I asked Lydia to tell me what she knew about the subject. She turned to La Gorda. Smoke is very important for sorcerers, La Gorda said. Smoke is like fog. Fog is, of course, better, but it's too hard to handle. It's not as handy as smoke is. So if a sorcerer wants to see and knows someone who's always hiding, like you and Josefina, who are capricious and difficult, the sorcerer makes a fire and lets the smoke envelop the person. Whatever they're hiding comes out in the smoke. La Gorda said that the Nagual used smoke not only to see and know people, but also to cure. He gave Josefina smoke baths. He made her stand or sit by the fire in the direction the wind was blowing. The smoke would envelop her and make her choke and cry, but her discomfort was only temporary and of no consequence. The positive effects, on the other hand, were a gradual cleansing of the luminosity. The Nagual gave all of us smoke baths, La Gorda said. He gave you even more baths than Josefina. He said that you were unbearable, and you weren't even pretending like she was. It all became clear to me. She was right. Don Juan had made me sit in front of a fire hundreds of times. The smoke used to irritate my throat and eyes to such a degree that I dreaded to see him begin to gather dry twigs and branches. He said that I had to learn to control my breathing and feel the smoke while I kept my eyes closed. That way, I could breathe without choking. La Gorda said that smoke had helped Josefina to be ethereal and very elusive, and that no doubt it had helped me to cure my madness, whatever it was. The Nagual said that smoke takes everything out of you, La Gorda went on. It makes you clear and direct.
Now you are transfixed.
I asked her if she knew how to bring out with the smoke whatever a person was hiding.
Visualize your surroundings.
She said that she could easily
You
do
are
it
high
because of having lost
up
her
in the night
form,
sky.
but that the little sisters and
No
the
longer
Genaros,
on
although they
planet
had
Earth,
seen the Nagual and Genaro do it
but a
scores
part
of
of the
times, could
universe.
not yet do it themselves.
The sky is dark.
I
and
was
evil
curious
in inky
to know
blackness.
why Don Juan had never mentioned
You
the subject to
sense
me,
depth,
in spite of the fact that he had smoked me
knowing
like
that
dry
this
fish
universe
hundreds of
leads
times.
out onto others.
He did, La Gorda said with her usual conviction. The Nagual even taught
Around
you
you,
fog gazing.
Millions.
He told
upon
us
millions
that
of
once you
twinkling
smoked a
stars.
whole place in the mountains and saw what was
Even
hiding
from
behind the
your
scenery.
vantage point,
He said that he was spellbound
they
himself.
seem so far away,
I remembered an exquisite
distant.
perceptual distortion,
and yet
a hallucination of
you
sorts,
are among
which
them.
I had had and thought was the product of a play between a most dense fog and an
They
electrical
blink
storm
at
that
you,
was occurring at the same
and
time.
as you gaze in
I
awe,
narrated to them the
you see a
episode and added that Don
shooting
Juan
star
had never
burning a
really
trail
directly
in the
taught
shape of
me
an
anything
eye.
about the fog or the smoke. His procedure had been
Some
to
stars
build
are so
fires
bright,
or to take me into fog
luminous,
banks.
even while others
La Gorda
are mere
didn't say a
dull
word.
twinkle, the
She
further
stood up
they
and
are
went back
away
to the
from you.
stove. Lydia shook her head and clicked her tongue. You sure are dumb, she
Breathe
said.
in deeply.
The Nagual taught you everything.
Hold that breath.
How do you think you saw what you have
And
just told
exhale.
us about? There was an abyss between our understanding
You're
of
now
how to
breathing
teach something.
away all
I
of your
told them that
thoughts,
if I were to teach them
and
something I
leaving
knew,
those deep
such as
down
how to
hidden
drive a car,
emotions which
I
may
would go
limit you
step
in
by
life.
step, making sure that they understood every facet of the whole procedure.
feel the
La
sense
Gorda
of
returned
peace
to the
and
table.
wonder that connects you here.
That's only if the sorcerer is teaching something about the tonal,
Embrace
she said.
calmness.
When the sorcerer
and
is dealing with the
serenity.
Nagual, he must give the instruction which is to show the mystery to the warrior. And that's all he has to do. The warrior who receives the mysteries must claim knowledge as power by doing what he has been shown. The Nagual showed you more mysteries than all of us together, but you're lazy, like Pablito, and prefer to be confused. The Tonal and the Nagual are two different worlds. In one, you talk. In the other, you act. At the moment she spoke, her words made absolute sense to me. I
Look
knew
down.
what she was talking about.
Planet Earth
She
is
went
a
back to
long
the
way
stove,
below you,
stirred something in a pot, and
yet
came
it
back again.
is unmistakably Earth.
Why are you so
with its
dumb?
multiple
Lydia
expanses
bluntly
of
asked
water
me.
that forms a part of the planet.
He's empty, Rosa replied.
There is
They
no
made me stand
fear
up and
here.
force themselves to squint as they scanned my body with their eyes. All of them touched my umbilical
Now you are
region.
moving slowly.
But why are you
traveling
still
towards the
empty?
moon.
Lydia asked.
Its ghostly aura.
You know
shimmering
what to
through
do,
the
don't you?
darkness.
Rosa added. He was crazy,
Plain of grey
Josefina said
dust
to them.
orbits
He must
the
still be
moon.
crazy now. La Gorda came to my aid
You
and told
stand
them
on it,
that I was still
marveling
empty
that
for the
this
same
layer
reason
of
they
dust
still had their
appears
form.
to hold you in place.
All of us, secretly, did not want
You
the
begin to
world of the
walk as
Nagual.
if on air,
We were afraid and had
floating.
second thoughts. In short,
magically.
none of us was better than Pablito. They didn't say a word. All three of them seemed thoroughly embarrassed.
As you attempt to circle the moon,
Poor little
another
Nagual,
planet appears.
Lydia said to me, with a tone of
Unlike
genuine
Earth,
concern.
This planet is vibrantly
You're as
colored
scared as
even
we
from
are.
Such a distance.
I pretend to be tough. Josefina pretends
It
to be
appears
crazy.
smaller than
Rosa
Earth,
pretends to
so
be
enticing.
ill-tempered. and you pretend to be dumb."
You feel a sense
They
of
laughed,
longing,
and for the first time since I had arrived,
as if
they made
by
a gesture of
some
comradeship
wave
toward
force,
me.
a
They embraced
wormhole,
me and put their heads
a
against
tunnel
mine.
glinting with stardust,
La Gorda
opened up in
sat
front
facing
of
me,
you,
and the little sisters sat
pulling
around
you
her.
into its
I
grip,
was facing all four of
and
them.
you are pulled towards the planet.
"Now we can talk about what happened tonight," La Gorda said. "The Nagual told me that if we survived the last contact
Drawn
with the
through
Allies,
rocks
we
and
wouldn't be
moon
the same.
dust,
The
you have
Allies
no
did something
fear,
to us tonight. They have
just
hurled us
hope,
away."
excitement,
She
and a
gently
deep
touched my
joy
writing hand.
within.
"Tonight was a special night for you," she went on. "Tonight, all of us pitched
As
in to help you,
cascade
including the
towards
Allies.
planet,
The Nagual would have liked
you
it.
hear its name.
Tonight, you saw all the way through."
As
"I
if
did?"
A whisper.
I asked. "There you go again," Lydia said, and everybody laughed. "Tell me about my seeing, Gorda," I insisted. "You know that I'm dumb. There should be no misunderstandings between us." "All right," she said. "I see what you mean. Tonight, you saw the little sisters." I said to them that I had also witnessed incredible acts performed by Don Juan and Don Genaro. I had seen them as plainly as I had seen the little sisters, and yet Don Juan and Don Genaro had always concluded that I had not seen. I failed, therefore, to determine in what way could the acts of the little sisters be different.
Your weight.
"You
And as
mean
you stand
you didn't
up
see
to
how
look
they were holding on to the lines of the
see
world?"
that Utopia
she asked.
is nothing like
"No,
you
I
have
didn't."
Ever imagined.
"You didn't see them slipping through the crack between the worlds?"
Green grass burst.
I
through the
narrated to
soil,
them what I had witnessed.
but the
They
texture is
listened
so
in
different.
silence. At the end of my
The
account,
trees
La Gorda
near
seemed
you
to
are
be on the
taller
verge of
and
tears.
twinned, and huge
"What a
tree trunks
pity,"
arc
she
outwards
exclaimed.
instead of up,
She stood up
as
and
twin
walked around the
canopies
table and
wave
embraced me.
majestically
Her
in the
eyes were
sky.
clear and restful. I knew she bore no
The
malice
sun,
toward me.
Just one
"It's our
orb,
fate that you were
singing
plugged
to
up like
Earth's
this,"
own,
she said.
beams a brilliant
"But you're
orange
still the
yellow
Nagual to
in a
us.
sky that
I
is
won't
tinged
hinder you with
mauve,
ugly thoughts. You can at
purple,
least be
and
assured of
red.
that." I knew that she meant it. She was speaking to me from a level that I had witnessed only in Don Juan.
Purple-tinted rivers
She had
trickle
repeatedly
across
explained her
sandy
mood
beds.
as the product of having lost her human form. She was
You walk
indeed
towards
a
a
formless
stream,
warrior.
An offshoot from the main
A wave
river,
of profound affection
and
for
as you
her
cup your
enveloped me.
hands to draw some
I was
water
about to
you,
weep. It was at the
water
instant that I
molecules
felt she
rise
was a
up
most marvelous
into the
warrior that
air,
quite an
drawn
intriguing
up
thing
into the
happened to
atmosphere.
me. The closest way of describing it would be to say that I felt
Utopia,
that my ears had
as if
suddenly
created by
popped,
artists for those
except
drawn to
that I
escape
felt the
normal
popping
life,
in the middle of my body, right below
designed
my
with
navel,
artistic
more
intent
acutely than in my
for
ears.
those who need to recognize
Right
the
after the
beauty
popping,
all around them.
everything became clearer. Sounds, sights, odors.
Utopia
Then
for those
I felt an
people who
intense
need to
buzzing,
explore
which,
and
oddly
to
enough, didn't
truly
interfere with my
absorb
hearing
life.
capacity. The buzzing was loud, but didn't drown out any other sounds.
Recognize
It
that
was
this
as if I
planet
were
has
hearing
drawn
the
you
buzzing with
towards it.
some part of me other than my ears.
You are here for a reason.
A hot flash went through my body,
To feel
and then I
inspired,
suddenly recalled something I
to
had never
ignite your
seen.
imagination,
It was as though
and
an alien memory had
to
taken
feel a
possession of me.
sense of deep contentment.
I remembered
peace,
Lydia
and
pulling
tranquility.
herself from two horizontal reddish ropes as she walked on the wall.
You are here
She
to
wasn't really
escape the
walking, she
norm.
was actually gliding on a thick bundle of lines that she held with her feet.
As you look around,
I remembered seeing her
behind
panting
you,
with her mouth open from the
high
exertion of
rocky
pulling the
mountains.
reddish ropes.
red
The
in
reason I
strong
couldn't hold my
sunlight,
balance at the end of her
with
display was
stunning
because I was
waterfalls,
seeing her
glints of purple
as a light
flashing
that went
between
around the
rocks
room so
inside
fast that it made
crevices.
me dizzy.
It's
It
as if an
pulled me
artist
from the
has
area
painted the
around my
scenes of
navel.
worlds within a world.
I remembered Rosa's actions and Josefina's
First,
as well.
Grass
Rosa
is
had
soft
actually
and inviting.
brachiated, with her left arm holding onto long vertical
second
reddish
part,
fibers that looked like vines
craggy
dropping from the
outlook
dark
of
roof.
mountains.
With her right
Where
arm,
each
she was
rock
also holding some
smoulders with
vertical
an
fibers
intensity
that seemed
like
to
none
give her
other.
stability. She also held on to the same fibers with her
Waterfalls that
toes.
dip in and
Toward
out
the end of her
unseen
display, she
caves,
was like a phosphorescence
visible as
on the
if
roof.
teasing the eyes for
The
a
lines
second,
of her body
and then
had been
disappearing
erased.
again.
Josefina was hiding herself behind some lines that seemed to come out of the floor. What she was doing with her raised forearm was moving the lines together to give them the necessary width to conceal her bulk. Her puffed-up clothes were a great prop. They had somehow contracted her luminosity. The clothes were bulky only for the eye that looked. At the end of her display, Josefina, like Lydia and Rosa, was just a patch of light. I could switch from one recollection to the other in my mind. When I told them about my concurrent memories, the little sisters looked at me bewildered. La Gorda was the only one who seemed to be following what was happening to me. She laughed with true delight and said that the Nagual was right in saying that I was too lazy to remember what I had seen. Therefore, I only bothered with what I had looked at. Is it possible, I thought to myself, that I'm unconsciously selecting what I recall? Or is it La Gorda who's creating all this? If it was true that I had selected my recall at first and then released what I had censored, then it also had to be true that I must have perceived much more of Don Juan's and Don Genaro's actions, and yet I could only recall a selective part of my total perception of those events.
Gives way to blues.
It's hard to believe, I said to La Gorda, that I can remember now something I didn't remember at all a while ago. The Nagual said that everyone can see, and yet we choose not to remember what we see, she said. Now I understand how right he was. All of us can see, some more than others. I told La Gorda that some part of me knew that I had found then a transcendental key. A missing piece had been handed down to me by all of them, but it was difficult to discern what it was.
You cannot resist touching.
She announced that she had just seen that I had practiced a good deal of dreaming, and that I had developed my attention, and yet I was fooled by my own appearance of not knowing anything. I've been trying to tell you about attention, she proceeded, but you know as much as we do about it.
Charming and once seen.
I assured her that my knowledge was intrinsically different from theirs. Theirs was infinitely more spectacular than mine. Anything they might say to me in relation to their practices, therefore, was a bonus to me. The Nagual told us to show you that with our attention we can hold the images of a dream in the same way we hold the images of the world, La Gorda said. The art of the dreamer is the art of attention. Thoughts came down on me like a landslide. I had to stand up and walk around the kitchen. I sat down again. We remained quiet for a long time. I knew what she had meant when she said that the art of dreamers was the art of attention. I knew then that Don Juan had told me and showed me everything he could. I had not been able, however, to realize the premises of his knowledge in my body while he was around. He had said that my reason was the demon that kept me chained, and that I had to vanquish it if I wanted to achieve the realization of his teachings. The issue, therefore, had been how to vanquish my reason. It had never occurred to me to press him for a definition of what he meant by reason. I presumed all along that he meant the capacity for comprehending, inferring, or thinking in an orderly, rational way. From what La Gorda had said, I knew that to him, reason meant attention. Don Juan said that the core of our being was the act of perceiving, and that the magic of our being was the act of awareness. For him, perception and awareness were a single, functional, inextricable unit, a unit which had two domains. The first one was the attention of the tonal, that is to say, the capacity of average people to perceive and place their awareness on the ordinary world of everyday life. Don Juan also called this form of attention our first ring of power, and described it as our awesome but taken for granted ability to impart order to our perception of our daily world. The second domain was the attention of the Nagual, that is to say, the capacity of sorcerers to place their awareness on the non-ordinary world. He called this domain of attention the second ring of power, or the altogether portentous ability that all of us have, but only sorcerers use, to impart order to the non-ordinary world. La Gorda and the Little Sisters, in demonstrating to me that the art of dreamers was to hold the images of their dreams with their attention, had brought in the pragmatic aspect of Don Juan's scheme. They were the practitioners who had gone beyond the theoretical aspect of his teachings. In order to give me a demonstration of their art, they had to make use of their second ring of power, or the attention of the Nagual. In order for me to witness their art, I had to do the same. In fact, it was evident that I had placed my attention on both domains. Perhaps all of us are continually perceiving in both fashions, but choose to isolate one for recollection and discard the other, or perhaps we file it away, as I myself had done. Under certain conditions of stress or acquiescence, the censored memory surfaces, and we can then have two distinct memories of one event. What Don Juan had struggled to vanquish, or rather suppress, in me was not my reason as the capacity for rational thought, but my attention of the tonal, or my awareness of the world of common sense. His motive for wanting me to do so was explained by La Gorda when she said that the daily world exists because we know how to hold its images. Consequently, if one drops the attention needed to maintain those images, the world collapses. The Nagual told us that practice is what counts, La Gorda said suddenly. Once you get your attention on the images of your dream, your attention is hooked for good. In the end, you can be like Genaro, who could hold the images of any dream. We each have 5 other dreams, Lydia said, but we showed you the first one because that was the dream the Nagual gave us. Can all of you go into dreaming anytime you want? I asked. No, La Gorda replied. Dreaming takes too much power. None of us has that much power. The reason the Little Sisters had to roll on the floor so many times was that in rolling, the earth was giving them energy. Maybe you could also remember seeing them as luminous beings getting energy from the light of the earth. The Nagual said that the best way of getting energy is, of course, to let the sun inside the eyes, especially the left eye. I told her that I knew nothing about it, and she described the procedure that Don Juan had taught them. As she spoke, I remembered that Don Juan had also taught the same procedure to me. It consisted in moving my head slowly from side to side as I caught the sunlight with my half-closed left eye. He said that one could not only use the sun, but could use any kind of light that could shine on the eyes. La Gorda said that the Nagual had recommended that they tie their shawls below their waists in order to protect their hip bones when they rolled. I commented that Don Juan had never mentioned rolling to me. She said that only women could roll because they had wombs and energy came directly into their wombs. By rolling around, they distributed that energy over the rest of their bodies. In order for a man to be energized, he had to be on his back with his knees bent so that the soles of his feet touched each other. His arms had to be extended laterally with his forearms raised vertically and the fingers clawed in an upright position.
I welcome sleep.
We've been dreaming those dreams for years, Lydia said. Those dreams are our best because our attention is complete. In the other dreams that we have, our attention is still shaky. La Gorda said that holding the images of dreams was a Toltec art. After years of consuming practice, each one of them was able to perform one act in any dream. Lydia could walk on anything. Rosa could dangle from anything. Josefina could hide behind anything, and she herself could fly. But they were only beginners, apprentices of the art. They had complete attention for only one activity.
and to experience
She added that
life the
Genaro
way
was the
not
master of
experienced
dreaming and
before.
could turn the tables around and have attention for as many activities as we have in our daily life,
And then
and that for him, the
exhale
two
slowly.
domains of attention had the same value.
You are complete.
I felt compelled to ask them my usual question.
You
I had
are
to know their
ready to
procedures,
sleep.
how they held the images of their dreams.
Enjoy.
You know that as well as we do, La Gorda said. The only thing I can say is that after going to the same dream over and over, we began to feel the lines of the world. They helped us to do what you saw us doing. Don Juan had said that our first ring of power is engaged very early in our lives, and that we live under the impression that that is all there is to us. Our second ring of power, the attention of the Nagual, remains hidden for the immense majority of us, and only at the moment of our death is it revealed to us. There is a pathway to reach it, however, which is available to every one of us, but which only sorcerers take, and that pathway is through dreaming. Dreaming was, in essence, the transformation of ordinary dreams into affairs involving volition. Dreamers, by engaging their attention of the Nagual and focusing it on the items and events of their ordinary dreams, change those dreams into dreaming. Don Juan said that there were no procedures to arrive at the attention of the Nagual. He only gave me pointers. Finding my hands in my dreams was the first pointer. Then the exercise of paying attention was elongated to finding objects, looking for specific features such as buildings, streets, and so on. From there, the jump was to dreaming about specific places at specific times of the day. The final stage was drawing the attention of the Nagual to focus on the total self. Don Juan said that that final stage was usually ushered in by a dream that many of us have had at one time or another, in which one is looking at oneself sleeping in bed. By the time a sorcerer has had such a dream, his attention has been developed to such a degree that instead of waking himself up, as most of us would do in a similar situation, he turns on his heels and engages himself in activity as if he were acting in the world of everyday life. From that moment on, there's a breakage, a division of sorts in the otherwise unified personality. The result of engaging the attention of the Nagual and developing it to the height and sophistication of our daily attention of the world was, in Don Juan's scheme, the other self, an identical being as oneself, but made in dreaming. Don Juan had told me that there are no definite standard steps for teaching that double, as there are no definite steps for us to reach our daily awareness. We simply do it by practicing. He contended that in the act of engaging our attention of the Nagual, we would find the steps. He urged me to practice dreaming without letting my fears make it into an encumbering production. He had done the same with La Gorda and the Little Sisters, but obviously something in them had made them more receptive to the idea of another level of attention. Genaro was in his body of dreaming most of the time, La Gorda said. He liked it better. That's why he could do the weirdest things and scare you half to death. Genaro could go in and out of the crack between the worlds like you and I can go in and out a door. Don Juan had also talked to me at great length about the crack between the worlds. I had always believed that he was talking in a metaphorical sense about a subtle division between the world that the average man perceives and the world that sorcerers perceive. La Gorda and the Little Sisters had shown me that the crack between the worlds was more than a metaphor. It was rather the capacity to change levels of attention. One part of me understood La Gorda perfectly, while another part of me was more frightened than ever. You've been asking where the Nagual and Genaro went, La Gorda said. Soledad was very blunt and told you that they went to the other world. Lydia told you they left this area. The Genaros were stupid and scared you. The truth is that the Nagual and Genaro went through that crack. For some reason, undefinable to me, her statements plunged me into profound chaos. I had felt all along that they had left for good. I knew that they had not left in an ordinary sense, but I had kept that feeling in the realm of a metaphor. Although I had even voiced it to close friends, I think I never really believed it myself. In the depths of me, I had always been a rational man. But La Gorda and the Little Sisters had turned my obscure metaphors into real possibilities. La Gorda had actually transported us half a mile with the energy of her dreaming. La Gorda stood up and said that I had understood everything and that it was time for us to eat. She served us the food that she had cooked. I didn't feel like eating. At the end of the meal, she stood up and came to my side. "I think it's time for you to leave," she said to me. That seemed to be a cue for the Little Sisters. They also stood up. "If you stay beyond this moment, you won't be able to leave anymore," La Gorda went on. "The Nagual gave you freedom once, but you chose to stay with him. He told me that if we all survived the last contact with the Allies, I should feed all of you, make you feel good, and then say goodbye to all of you. I figure that the Little Sisters and myself have no place to go, so there's no choice for us. But you are different." The Little Sisters surrounded me, and each said goodbye to me. There was a monstrous irony in that situation. I was free to leave, but I had no place to go. There was no choice for me either. Years before, Don Juan gave me a chance to back out. I stayed, because already then I had no place to go. "We choose only once," he had said then. "We choose either to be warriors or to be ordinary men. A second choice does not exist. Not on this earth." Chapter 6. The Second Attention. "You have to leave later on today," La Gorda said to me right after breakfast. "Since you've decided to go with us, you've committed yourself to helping us fulfill our new task. The Nagual left me in charge only until you came. He entrusted me, as you already know, with certain things to tell you. I've told you most of them, but there are still some I couldn't mention to you until you made your choice. Today we will take care of them. Right after that, you must leave in order to give us time to get ready. We need a few days to settle everything and to prepare to leave these mountains forever. We have been here a very long time. It's hard to break away, but everything has come to a sudden end. The Nagual warned us of the total change that you would bring, regardless of the outcome of your bouts, but I think no one really believed him." "I failed to see why you have to change anything," I said. "I've explained it to you already," she protested. "We have lost our old purpose. Now we have a new one, and that new purpose requires that we become as light as the breeze. The breeze is our new mood. It used to be the hot wind. You've changed our direction." "You're talking in circles, Gorda." "Yes, but that's because you're empty. I can't make it any clearer. When you return, the Genaros will show you the art of the stalker, and right after that, all of us will leave. The Nagual said that if you decide to be with us, the first thing I should tell you is that you have to remember your bouts with Soledad and the Little Sisters and examine every single thing that happened to you with them, because everything is an omen of what will happen to you on your path. If you are careful and impeccable, you'll find that those bouts were gifts of power." "What's Doña Soledad going to do now?" "She's leaving. The Little Sisters have already helped her to take her floor apart. That floor aided her to reach her attention of the Nagual. The lines had power to do that. Each of them helped her gather a piece of that attention. To be incomplete, It is no handicap to reaching that attention for some warriors. Soledad was transformed because she got to that attention faster than any of us. She doesn't have to gaze at her floor anymore to go into that other world. And now that there is no more need for the floor, she has returned it to the earth where she got it. You are really determined to leave, Gorda, aren't you? All of us are. That's why I'm asking you to go away for a few days to give us time to pull down everything we have. Am I the one who has to find a place for all of you, Gorda? If you were an impeccable warrior, you would do just that. But you're not an impeccable warrior, and neither are we. But we still have to do our best to meet our new challenge. I felt an oppressive sense of doom. I have never been one to thrive on responsibilities. I thought that the commitment to guide them was a crushing burden that I couldn't handle. Maybe we don't have to do anything, I said. Yes, that's right, she said and laughed. Why don't you tell yourself that over and over until you feel safe? The Nagual told you time and time again that the only freedom warriors have is to behave impeccably. She told me how the Nagual had insisted that all of them understand that not only was impeccability freedom, but it was the only way to scare away the human form. I narrated to her the way Don Juan made me understand what was meant by impeccability. He and I were hiking one day through a very steep ravine when a huge boulder got loose from its matrix on the rock wall and came down with a formidable force and landed on the floor of the canyon 20 or 30 yards from where we were standing. The size of the boulder made its fall a very impressive event. Don Juan seized the opportunity to create a dramatic lesson. He said that the force that rules our destinies is outside of ourselves and has nothing to do with our acts or volition. Sometimes that force would make us stop walking on our way and bend over to tie our shoelaces, as I had just done. And by making us stop, that force makes us gain a precious moment. If we had kept on walking, that enormous boulder would have most certainly crushed us to death. Some other day, however, in another ravine, the same outside deciding force would make us stop again, to bend over and tie our shoelaces, while another boulder would get loose precisely above where we are standing. By making us stop, that force would have made us lose a precious moment. That time, if we had kept on walking, we would have saved ourselves. Don Juan said that in view of my total lack of control over the forces which decide my destiny, my only possible freedom in that ravine consisted in my tying my shoelaces impeccably. La Gorda seemed to be moved by my account. For an instant, she held my face in her hands from across the table. Impeccability, for me, is to tell you at the right time what the Nagual told me to tell you, she said. But power has to time perfectly what I have to reveal to you, or it won't have any effect. She paused in a dramatic fashion. Her delay was very studied, but terribly effective with me. What is it? I asked desperately. She didn't answer. She took me by the arm and led me to the area just outside the front door. She made me sit on the hard-packed ground with my back against a thick pole about 1.5 feet high that looked like a tree stump, which had been planted in the ground almost against the wall of the house. There was a row of 5 such poles planted about 2 feet apart. I had meant to ask La Gorda what their function was. My first impression had been that a former owner of the house had tied animals to them. My conjecture seemed incongruous, however, because the area just outside the front door was a kind of roofed porch. I told La Gorda my supposition as she sat down next to me to my left, with her back against another pole. She laughed and said that the poles were indeed used for tying animals of sorts, but not by a former owner, and that she had nearly broken her back digging the holes for them. What do you use them for? I asked. Let's say that we tie ourselves to them, she replied. And this brings me to the next thing the Nagual asked me to tell you. He said that because you were empty, he had to gather your second attention, your attention of the Nagual, in a way different than ours. We gathered that attention through dreaming, and you did it with his power plants. The Nagual said that his power plants gathered the menacing side of your second attention in one clump, and that's the shape that came out of your head. He said that that's what happens to sorcerers when they're given power plants. If they don't die, the power plants spin their second attention into that awful shape that comes out of their heads. Now we're coming to what he wanted you to do. He said that you must change directions now and begin gathering your second attention in another way, more like us. You can't keep on the path of knowledge unless you balance your second attention. So far, that attention of yours has been riding on the Nagual's power, but now you're alone. That's what he wanted me to tell you. How do I balance my second attention? You have to do dreaming the way we do it. Dreaming is the only way to gather the second attention without injuring it, without making it menacing and awesome. Your second attention is fixed on the awful side of the world. Ours is on the beauty of it. You have to change sides and come with us. That's what you chose last night when you decided to go with us. Could that shape come out of me at any time? No. The Nagual said that it won't come out again until you're as old as he is. Your Nagual has already come out as many times as was needed. The Nagual and Genaro have seen to that. They used to tease it out of you. The Nagual told me that sometimes you were a hair away from dying because your second attention is very indulging. He said that once you even scared him, your Nagual attacked him, and he had to sing to it to calm it down. But the worst thing happened to you in Mexico City. There, he pushed you one day, and you went into an office, and in that office you went through the crack between the worlds. He intended only to dispel your attention of the tonal. But you were worried sick over some stupid thing. But when he shoved you, your whole tonal shrunk, and your entire being went through the crack. He had a hellish time finding you. He told me that for a moment he thought you had gone farther than he could reach, but then he saw you roaming around aimlessly and he brought you back. He told me that you went through the crack around 10 in the morning. So on that day, 10 in the morning became your new time. My new time? For what? For everything. If you remain a man, you will die around that time. If you become a sorcerer, you will leave this world around that time. Eligio also went on a different path, a path none of us knew about. We met him just before he left. Eligio was a most marvelous dreamer. He was so good that the Nagual and Genaro used to take him through the crack, and he had the power to withstand it as if it were nothing. He didn't even pant. The Nagual and Genaro gave him a final boost with power plants. He had the control and the power to handle that boost, and that's what sent him to wherever he is. The Genaros told me that Eligio jumped with Benigno. Is that true? Sure. By the time Eligio had to jump, his second attention had already been in that other world. The Nagual said that yours had also been there, but that for you it was a nightmare because you had no control. He said that his power plants had made you lopsided. They had made you cut through your attention of the tonal and had put you directly in the realm of your second attention, but without any mastery over that attention. The Nagual didn't give power plants to Eligio until the very last. Do you think that my second attention has been injured, Gorda? The Nagual never said that. He thought you were dangerously crazy, but that has nothing to do with power plants. He said that both of your attentions are unmanageable. If you could conquer them, you'd be a great warrior. I wanted her to tell me more on the subject. She put her hand on my writing pad and said that we had a terribly busy day ahead of us and we needed to store energy in order to withstand it. We had, therefore, to energize ourselves with the sunlight. She said that the circumstances required that we take the sunlight with the left eye. She began to move her head slowly from side to side as she glanced directly into the sun through her half-closed eyes. A moment later, Lydia, Rosa, and Josefina joined us. Lydia sat to my right, Josefina sat next to her, while Rosa sat next to La Gorda. All of them were resting their backs against the poles. I was in the middle of the row. It was a clear day. The sun was just above the distant range of mountains. They started moving their heads in perfect synchronization. I joined them and had the feeling that I too had synchronized my motion with theirs. They kept it up for about a minute and then stopped. All of them wore hats and used the brims to protect their faces from the sunlight when they weren't bathing their eyes in it. La Gorda had given me my old hat to wear. We sat there for about half an hour. In that time, we repeated the exercise countless times. I intended to make a mark on my pad for each time, but La Gorda very casually pushed my pad out of reach. Lydia suddenly stood up, mumbling something unintelligible. La Gorda leaned over to me and whispered that the Genaros were coming up the road. I strained to look, but there was no one in sight. Rosa and Josefina also stood up and then went with Lydia inside the house. I told La Gorda that I couldn't see anyone approaching. She replied that the Genaros had been visible at one point on the road and added that she had dreaded the moment when all of us would have to get together, but that she was confident that I could handle the situation. She advised me to be extra careful with Josefina and Pablito, because they had no control over themselves. She said that the most sensible thing for me to do would be to take the Genaros away after an hour or so. I kept looking at the road. There was no sign of anyone approaching. "Are you sure they're coming?" I asked. She said that she hadn't seen them, but that Lydia had. The Genaros had been visible just for Lydia because she had been gazing at the same time she had been bathing her eyes. I wasn't sure what La Gorda had meant and asked her to explain. "We're gazers," she said. "Just like yourself. We're all the same. There's no need to deny that you're a gazer. The Nagual told us about your great feats of gazing." "My great feats of gazing? What are you talking about, Gorda?" She contracted her mouth and appeared to be on the verge of being irritated by my question. She seemed to catch herself. She smiled and gave me a gentle shove. At that moment, she had a sudden flutter in her body. She stared blankly past me. Then she shook her head vigorously. She said that she had just seen that the Genaros were not coming after all. It was too early for them. They were going to wait for a while before they made their appearance. She smiled, as if she were delighted with the delay. "It's too early for us to have them here anyway," she said. "And they feel the same about us." "Where are they now?" I asked. "They must be sitting beside the road somewhere," she replied. "Benigno had no doubt gazed at the house as they were walking and saw us sitting here, and that's why they've decided to wait. That's perfect. That will give us time." "You scare me, Gorda. Time for what?" "You have to round up your second detention today, just for us four." "How can I do that?" "I don't know. You are very mysterious to us. The Nagual has done scores of things to you with his power plants, but you can't claim that as knowledge. That's what I've been trying to tell you. Only if you have mastery over your second attention can you perform with it. Otherwise, you'll always stay fixed halfway between the two as you are now. Everything that has happened to you since you arrived has been directed to force that attention to spin. I've been giving you instructions little by little, just as the Nagual told me to do. Since you took another path, you don't know the things that we know, just like we don't know anything about power plants." Soledad knows a bit more because the Nagual took her to his homeland. Nestor knows about medicinal plants, but none of us has been taught the way you were. We don't need your knowledge yet, but someday, when we're ready, you are the one who will know what to do to give us a boost with power plants. I am the only one who knows where the Nagual's pipe is hidden, waiting for that day. The Nagual's command is that you have to change your path and go with us. That means that you have to do dreaming with us and stalking with the Genaros. You can't afford any longer to be where you are on the awesome side of your second attention. Another jolt of your Nagual coming out of you could kill you. The Nagual told me that human beings are frail creatures composed of many layers of luminosity. When you see them, they seem to have fibers, but those fibers are really layers like an onion. Jolts of any kind separate those layers and can even cause human beings to die. She stood up and led me back to the kitchen. We sat down facing each other. Lydia, Rosa, and Josefina were busy in the yard. I couldn't see them, but I could hear them talking and laughing. The Nagual said that we die because our layers become separated, La Gorda said. Jolts are always separating them, but they get together again. Sometimes, though, the jolt is so great that the layers get loose and can't get back together anymore. Have you ever seen the layers, Gorda? Sure. I saw a man dying in the street. The Nagual told me that you also found a man dying, but you didn't see his death. The Nagual made me see the dying man's layers. They were like the peels of an onion. When human beings are healthy, they are like luminous eggs, but if they're injured, they begin to peel like an onion. The Nagual told me that your second attention was so strong sometimes that it pushed all the way out. He and Genaro had to hold your layers together, otherwise you would have died. That's why he figured that you might have enough energy to get your Nagual out of you twice. He meant that you could hold your layers together by yourself twice. You did it more times than that, and now you're finished. You have no more energy to hold your layers together in case of another jolt. The Nagual has entrusted me to take care of everyone. In your case, I have to help you to tighten your layers. The Nagual said that death pushes the layers apart. He explained to me that the center of our luminosity, which is the attention of the Nagual, is always pushing out, and that's what loosens the layers. So it's easy for death to come in between them and push them completely apart. Sorcerers have to do their best to keep their own layers closed. That's why the Nagual taught us in dreaming. Dreaming tightens the layers. When sorcerers learn dreaming, they tie together their two attentions, and there's no more need for that center to push out. Do you mean that sorcerers do not die? That's right. Sorcerers do not die. Do you mean that none of us is going to die? I didn't mean us. We are nothing. We're freaks, neither here nor there. I meant sorcerers. The Nagual and Genaro are sorcerers. Their two attentions are so tightly together that perhaps they'll never die. Did the Nagual say that, Gorda? Yes, he and Genaro both told me that. Not too long before they left, the Nagual explained to us the power of attention. I never knew about the Tonal and the Nagual until then. La Gorda recounted the way Don Juan had instructed them about that crucial Tonal-Nagual dichotomy. She said that one day the Nagual had all of them gather together in order to take them for a long hike to a desolate rocky valley in the mountains. He made a large, heavy bundle with all kinds of items. He even put Pablito's radio in it. He then gave the bundle to Josefina to carry and put a heavy table on Pablito's shoulders, and they all started hiking. He made all of them take turns carrying the bundle and the table as they hiked nearly 40 miles to that high, desolate place. When they arrived there, the Nagual made Pablito set the table in the very center of the valley. Then he asked Josefina to arrange the contents of the bundle on the table. When the table was filled, he explained to them the difference between the tonal and the nagual, in the same terms he'd explained it to me in a restaurant in Mexico City, except that in their case, his example was infinitely more graphic. He told them that the tonal was the order that we are aware of in our daily world, and also the personal order that we carry through life on our shoulders, like they had carried that table and the bundle. The personal tonal of each of us was like the table in that valley, a tiny island filled with the things that we're familiar with. The nagual, on the other hand, was the inexplicable source that held that table in place and was like the vastness of that deserted valley. He told them that sorcerers were obligated to watch their tonals from a distance in order to have a better grasp of what was really around them. He made them walk to a ridge from where they could view the whole area. From there, the table was hardly visible. He then made them go back to the table and had them all loom over it in order to show that an average man does not have the grasp that a sorcerer has, because an average man is right on top of his table, holding onto every item on it. He then made each of them, one at a time, casually look at the objects on the table and tested their recall by taking something and hiding it to see if they had been attentive. All of them passed the test with flying colors. He pointed out to them that their ability to remember so easily the items on that table was due to the fact that all of them had developed their attention of the tonal, or their attention over the table. He next asked them to look casually at everything that was on the ground underneath the table and tested their recall by removing the rocks, twigs, or whatever else was there. None of them could remember what they had seen under the table. The nagual then swept everything off the top of the table and made each of them, one at a time, lie across it on their stomachs and carefully examine the ground underneath. He explained to them that for a sorcerer, the nagual was the area just underneath the table. Since it was unthinkable to tackle the immensity of the nagual as exemplified by that vast, desolate place, sorcerers took as their domain of activity the area directly below the island of the tonal, as graphically shown by what was underneath that table. That area was the domain of what he called the second attention, or the attention of the nagual, or the attention under the table. That attention was reached only after warriors had swept the top of their tables clean. He said that reaching the second attention made the two attentions into a single unit, and that unit was the totality of oneself. La Gorda said that his demonstration was so clear to her that she understood at once why the nagual had made her clean her own life, sweep her island of the tonal, as he had called it. She felt that she had indeed been fortunate in having followed every suggestion that he had put to her. She was still a long way from unifying her two attentions, but her diligence had resulted in an impeccable life, which was, as he had assured her, the only way for her to lose her human form. Losing the human form was the essential requirement for unifying the two attentions. The attention under the table is the key to everything sorcerers do, she went on. In order to reach that attention, the Nagual and Genaro taught us dreaming, and you were taught about power plants. I don't know what they did to you to teach you how to trap your second attention with power plants, but to teach us how to do dreaming, the Nagual taught us gazing. He never told us what he was really doing to us. He just taught us to gaze. We never knew that gazing was the way to trap our second attention. We thought gazing was just for fun. That was not so. Dreamers have to be gazers before they can trap their second attention. The first thing the Nagual did was to put a dry leaf on the ground and make me look at it for hours. Every day he brought a leaf and put it in front of me. At first I thought that it was the same leaf that he saved from day to day, but then I noticed that leaves are different. The Nagual said that when we realized that, were not looking anymore, but gazing. Then he put stacks of dry leaves in front of me. He told me to scramble them with my left hand and feel them as I gazed at them. A dreamer moves the leaves in spirals, gazes at them, and then dreams of the designs that the leaves make. The Nagual said that dreamers can consider themselves as having mastered leaf gazing when they dream the designs of the leaves first, and then find those same designs the next day in their pile of dry leaves. The Nagual said that gazing at leaves fortifies the second attention. If you gaze at a pile of leaves for hours, as you used to make me do, your thoughts get quiet. Without thoughts, the attention of the tonal wanes, and suddenly your second attention hooks onto the leaves, and the leaves become something else. The Nagual called the moment when the second attention hooks onto something stopping the world. And that is correct. The world stops. For this reason, there should always be someone around when you gaze. We never know about the quirks of our second attention. Since we've never used it, we have to become familiar with it before we could venture into gazing alone. The difficulty in gazing is to learn to quiet down the thoughts. The Nagual said that he preferred to teach us how to do that with a pile of leaves because we could get all the leaves we needed any time we wanted to gaze. But anything else would do the same job. Once you can stop the world, you are a gazer. And since the only way of stopping the world is by trying, the Nagual made all of us gaze at dry leaves for years and years. I think it's the best way to reach our second attention. He combined gazing at dry leaves and looking for our hands in dreaming. It took me about a year to find my hands, and 4 years to stop the world. The Nagual said that once you have trapped your second attention with dry leaves, you do gazing and dreaming to enlarge it. And that's all there is to gazing. You make it sound so simple, Gorda. Everything the Toltecs do is very simple. The Nagual said that all we needed to do in order to trap our second attention was to try and try. All of us stopped the world by gazing at dry leaves. You and Eligio were different. You yourself did it with power plants, but I don't know what path the Nagual followed with Eligio. He never wanted to tell me. He told me about you because we have the same task. I mentioned that I had written in my notes that I had had the first complete awareness of having stopped the world only a few days before. She laughed. You stopped the world before any of us, she said. What do you think you did when you took all those power plants? You've never done it by gazing like we did, that's all. Was the pile of dry leaves the only thing the Nagual made you gaze at? Once dreamers know how to stop the world, they can gaze at other things. And finally, when the dreamers lose their form altogether, they can gaze at anything. I do that. I can go into anything. He made us follow a certain order in gazing, though. First, we gazed at small plants. The Nagual warned us that small plants are very dangerous. Their power is concentrated. They have a very intense light, and they feel when dreamers are gazing at them. They immediately move their light and shoot it at the gazer. Dreamers have to choose one kind of plant to gaze at. Next, we gazed at trees. Dreamers also have a particular kind of tree to gaze at. In this respect, you and I are the same. Both of us are eucalyptus gazers. By the look on my face, she must have guessed my next question. The Nagual said that with his smoke, you could very easily get your second attention to work, she went on. You focused your attention lots of times on the Nagual's predilection, the crows. He said that once your second attention focused so perfectly on a crow that it flew away like a crow flies to the only eucalyptus tree that was around. For years, I had dwelled upon that experience. I couldn't regard it in any other way except as an inconceivably complex hypnotic state brought about by the psychotropic mushrooms contained in Don Juan's smoking mixture, in conjunction with his expertise as a manipulator of behavior. He suggested a perceptual catharsis in me, that of turning into a crow and perceiving the world as a crow. The result was that I perceived the world in a manner that could not have possibly been part of my inventory of past experiences. La Gorda's explanation somehow had simplified everything. She said that the Nagual next made them gaze at moving, living creatures. He told them that small insects were by far the best subject. Their mobility made them innocuous to the gazer, the opposite of plants, which drew their light directly from the earth. The next step was to gaze at rocks. She said that rocks were very old and powerful, and had a specific light which was rather greenish in contrast with the white light of